Good morning. Good afternoon. History. Yes. The burning question we so often ask when we think about violence in the past is, why does history repeat itself? But of course, that is the wrong question, because history does not repeat itself. History is just the way we tell the story about the past. What the real burning question should be is, why don't we learn from history? Why don't we learn from what happened in Armenia in the early 1900s? From what happened to the Jewish people in the mid-20th century? Or from Cambodia in the 1970s? Why don't we learn from what happened in Rwanda? Because just last year it happened all over again in Myanmar. And notice one thing about the pictures I just showed you. Every single one of them has children in them. Which leads to another burning question. Why do we hate each other so much that we will kill each other's children? 1993, filmmaker Steven Spielberg was on the set of a film called Schindler's List. One day at this very space outside of the concentration camp Auschwitz, where over 1 million Jewish people were murdered, one day one of those survivors came there while he was filming, and he was talking to her and asking her what it was like to arrive there that day. And she said to him, "Mr. Spielberg, I don't want to tell you just about this one day in my life. I had a life before and I had a life after." And Lucia that day identified something very important. She's not a victim. She's a person with a life, with a story to tell. And so from that day, Steven Spielberg founded an organization, today called the USC Shoah Foundation. Shoah is the Hebrew word for Holocaust. He decided he wanted to give everybody the opportunity to tell their story, and so he went to people's homes around the world. Holocaust survivors like Sigmund, survivors from Cambodia like Thierry, survivors from Rwanda like Freddie. And we created 55,000 interviews with people around the globe in 65 countries, in 43 languages, and created an archive of humanity. Mrs. Salibian at the front of this picture here is 101 when she gave her story about the Armenian genocide. Dario, standing at the back, 96 years old, is probably the only person alive today that worked in the gas chambers at Auschwitz. The three beautiful women from Rwanda, from Cambodia and Guatemala, all telling their story to this archive of humanity. And what you notice about them is this: they come from every part of the globe. It tells us that genocide, while it has extraordinarily bad consequences, happens in ordinary societies. Societies like the one I live in, the one you live in. It tells us that this can happen anywhere, at any time, to anyone. And yes, we mean anywhere and anyone. And so we share those stories around the world on our platforms. We create research programs in over 140 universities around the world. We create digital platforms for teachers and schools to share this story around the globe in all of those languages. And because this is a global mission to reduce the prevalence of genocide, we work with partners around the world, including the wonderful Museo Memoria y Tolerancia here in Mexico City. Yes. The amazing Sharon Zargowitz founder is here today. Thank you, Sharon, for all you do in this country and around the world with your work. Because indeed, we can only do this if we work together. But then the question was, how do we tell this story to future generations? And so we started to think about bringing us closer to the story, maybe using virtual reality. Here, another story, The Last Goodbye, about another child that was murdered in genocide. Her name, Sabina. Her twin brother survived. His name is Pinchas. So we went back to the very place where Pinchas and Sabina as twins were split and never saw each other again. This was the place that he last saw his father. And now you can go there in virtual reality. You can visit the place of Majdanek, bringing us closer to him and to his life. But then there was another question, another burning question brought up by the amazing Heather Mayo, also here today, who came to me and said, Stephen, my grandchildren will never have the opportunity to converse or listen to a Holocaust survivor. How can we create the conversation for the future so that they can do that? And so we worked with her and we asked Pinchas to come back into a studio in Los Angeles at the Shoah Foundation, and we asked him a few questions, a few burning questions, 1,000 actually, over a period of a week. So that in future you will be able to go and ask questions. Heather and her grandchildren will be able to ask questions of him, because what we wanted to know was, for the future, how do we create a conversation with the past? A conversation for the future. So what we're going to do is have a little conversation with Pinchas. Hello. Hello. Now, the great thing about technology...
Hello.
...is it sometimes works. What's your name?
My name is Pinchas.
Where were you born?
I was born in Łódź, Poland, the second largest city in Poland at the time.
Oh, how old are you?
I was born in 1932, so you can make your own arithmetic.
And Pinchas, do you have any brothers and sisters?
I had a twin sister. That's the only sibling I had.
What was your sister's name?
My sister's name was Shifra Trana, but everybody called her Sabina.
What happened to your sister?
My parents and my sister were murdered in the gas chambers of Majdanek death camp.
What was it like to be in a concentration camp?
Life in the camp was indescribable because it was living death. And that's the only way I can describe it. Being in a concentration camp or even on a working camp during the Holocaust was living like living death. You were just 1 centimeter from the grave.
Do you hate the Germans?
I don't hate the perpetrators. I don't believe in hate. I don't condone anything. I believe that perpetrators should be punished. They should be brought to a court of law. They should be judged, and they should be condemned if they are guilty to be... If I was a judge, I would put them into one little, 4 by 4 foot cell and let them there for the rest of their life. As an example, I am against the death penalty. I believe death penalty, regardless of whether it's by government or not, is judicial murder. So I really am against taking life of any kind. But I do believe that perpetrators, I can't forgive, I can't forget, but I'm not a person who can ever hate anything, because I really am I have such strong belief that hate behates, that it can only do worse, it can only bring worse things onto the world.
Do you have any regrets?
I regret my family, my surroundings, my life. I regret the fact that I am not, that life that existed in Poland before the war doesn't exist. I regret the fact that I am not part of that life, and that a life that I was born into being, and that I had to, go through all these, tortures and sufferings. And mostly, I regret not being able to remember my sister. That when I think of my sister Sabina, I can only remember her braid, her golden braid, and nothing else. And I think that is something that is so deeply hurting that I would say that's the thing that I most regret, that I cannot remember her, or that I cannot be with her. My twin sister.
Ladies and gentlemen, this conversation is there for future generations, but it's my great pleasure today to welcome to the stage the real Pinchas Gutter. Thank you, Pinchas. Pinchas came all the way from Toronto to be with us today, so thank you for making the journey here. Pinchas, I want to start where we left off just a moment ago, where you mentioned the fact that you don't remember your twin sister. How is that so when she was probably the closest person to you ever?
Well, I can't really say why. I have a photographic memory and I remember everything. I mean, I've got all these pictures in my mind, which if IT would be now so advanced that you could actually take from the brain and project things on the wall, I may be able to project things that I've seen and I went through, because I went around in the Warsaw Ghetto and the camps and everything, using my eyes as lenses and my brain as a less, film, just photographing everything, and I kept it. And I think what actually happened was, when we arrived in Majdanek, they separated the men from the women with children, and so forth, so on. And in the Warsaw Ghetto, we knew that there were selections, and that they did have, there was a chance of somebody, surviving. But children and women didn't. Now, for some reason, my sister was separated from my mother, and she was pushed with the children, and my mother was standing with the women herself. And my father told me that I must say I'm 5 years older, and on all the documents that I've got from the war, that's what I've got. I'm 5 years older than I actually supposed to be. And what actually happened was, my sister spied my mother. She actually saw her. So she started running, and of course I saw with the plate, because I saw her from the back. She came and she grabbed my mother. And my mother kept with her, which meant that she chose, because my mother did have a chance, if she stood just with the women, there was no chance that my mother would leave my sister away. And I think somehow or other, my brain did something, and it shut out everything from the child. I can't remember anything. I give you an example. I mean, if I walk there in the street, and we do a holding hands, I know I'm holding hands with my sister, but I can't see her.
Pinchas, why do you tell your story? Because it's clearly very painful to do so.
Well, I think I tell my story for many reasons. One of the most important ones is there's so much denial about iniquity. Not only about the Holocaust, but iniquity. People tend to deny that things happen. They always got explanations. And I think it's very important, if you have a witness, somebody that saw this, they should be able to do that. But on the other, and the second thing is, I actually tell the story, if you believe me, to make the world a better place. Because I believe if I go to lots of universities and schools and I tell it to children, and I believe that I'm using it almost as a vaccination. You know? I use it, this is what it is, I'm vaccinating you, you're seeing this horror, I'm just giving you a little bit, make the world a better place. And that's the reason, the main reason why I'm talking.
How would you like your testimony, the one we've just seen just now, the interactive testimony, and the virtual reality film that you made, how would you like to see them used?
Well, I would like to see them used as much as possible in schools and educational centers, because I think that if you start teaching children, and especially, and also on universities, and they can see what actually happened, and they can have an interaction with you. It's really, you know, some people where I've been places where they've been showing it, they didn't believe when I walked in the street and they say, "Oh, hello, I actually met you there, you know, talking to you." And some people sent that image, and sometimes I think that I'm the robot and that's the real thing. So, you know, I really believe that if you're seeing and have an interaction with a person, even with this medium, so many people who have seen it have actually believed that this is that it's real, and it is real, because basically I was there. I answered over 2,000 questions. I think they chose about 1,500 in answer because they asked me different questions of the same thing in a different way. So I believe that this is a very important tool of education, and it will have an enormous amount of impact. And I think more and more people should do it from everywhere.
What do you feel when you see genocide and intolerance and hate in the world happening?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you something. When I see the last one, when I saw the Rohingya, you know, being chased out of Myanmar, I mean, it just broke my heart. I really couldn't kind of get around it in my head that after all these years, after all these things happening, that still today you can take almost 1 million people and chase them out just because they are a different religion and because you don't like them or you don't want them, and you just do ethnic cleaning. And that's something which, you know, for me is absolutely abhorrent.
Are you hopeful for the future? Are you optimistic, pessimistic?
Well, I'm hopeful for the future because I believe that even today, I mean, when you think about it, in the 30s, when Jews were trying to emigrate anywhere, find refuge, someplace, islands, whatever, all the doors were closed. As a matter of fact, there's a Yiddish song which says, you know, wherever you go, the doors are closed in your face. Today, I mean, in Toronto, where I live, when the Syrian refugees were being, you know, chased out and all that Syrian catastrophe started, I mean, we welcomed 40,000, you know, refugees to Canada. Before the war, one ship with a few hundred people was chased away from Canada. So things, you can see, things are improving. The only thing is that the world moves very, very slow. Now I always give you that example with the pebble. You know, the pebble that you find, a beautiful pebble on the beach, and it's kind of very nice when you pick it up. It's smooth, it's warm, it's comforting. It's taken thousands or millions of years for the water to make it, you know, smooth and comforting and lovely. And I think that the world is going in the right direction. How long it will take, I don't know. I hope sooner than later.
Pinkas Gutter, thank you for all you've done for us and for the future.